Is the White House now hanging the paused Disinformation Governance Board out to dry? And finally tonight, also taking some action to try to help mitigate the baby formula shortage crisis. Let's talk about how the White House is doing on numerous fronts with tonight's Bream Team. Fox News contributor Richard Fowler and Project 21 co-chair Horace Cooper. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us tonight.
Good evening.
Good to see you.
Okay, so Taylor Lawrence writing in the Washington Post about all of this disinformation board. It's now paused, how it went down. Nina Jankowicz, she says, was unfairly targeted by right-wing ghouls, essentially, who ripped this whole thing apart with misinformation. Says Jankowicz's experience is a prime example of how the right-wing internet apparatus operates, where far-right influencers attempt to identify a target, present a narrative, and then repeat mischaracterizations across social media and websites with the aim of discrediting and attacking anyone who seeks to challenge them. Horace, they say, this is the perfect example of what they're trying to stop.
Okay, so this administration failed to explain why they were creating this agency. They failed to explain what this agency is going to be empowered to do. They failed to explain its scope. But the problem here, as we're just being told, is it's right-wingers who have created a narrative. The onus on government whenever they create anything, whether it's a new social program or a government agency, they have the duty of explaining what it's going to do, how much is it going to cost, what are its responsibilities. They failed abysmally here.
Well, Nina Jankowicz spoke out tonight and said, I fully understand that Americans are concerned. They don't want the government involved in policing speech. But, Richard, that's what it sounded like to us they were going to do. That was the plan.
Listen, I agree with Horace on this. I think the government didn't do the best of job of creating a narrative explaining exactly what this commission was going to do. But there's no question that we as the American people, and more importantly, the American voters, continues to suffer from misinformation and disinformation in the electoral system. Much of that disinformation in 2016 and 2020 came from foreign governments who tried to engage in our election through bad, crazy Facebook ads exciting the divisions in this country. And we should, as a nation, be looking out to make sure that foreign governments aren't pushing disinformation into our zeitgeist or into our waterway of information, so that voters cannot make educated decisions because they're making decisions based on fake news, false news, or stories perpetuated by a foreign government that will cause folks to stay at home or not be part of the voting process.
Let's talk about the baby formula crisis, the shortage. I think we all agree this shouldn't be a partisan issue. There are children and infants and families who are suffering because of the situation. Tonight, the president says he's invoking the Defense Production Act to help get this formula where it needs to go, bring it from outside, change regulations at least temporarily to make sure it's safe, but it gets to people who need it. Horace, will that solve the problem?
I hope so, but this is, again, yet another example of gross incompetence. When this problem was first brought to the administration's attention back at the beginning of this year, some action should have been taken. The Secretary of HHS should have been empowered. The Secretary of Agriculture should have been empowered to act affirmatively. Now what we're seeing is a blame game. Oh, it's not me, it's the guy behind the tree. I hope that we see some action soon, but we've already had 2 children hospitalized. How many more before they get this problem behind us?
Washington Post editorial board tonight has a piece where they say this: the nation needs a full and rational accounting of this mess and the troubling questions about why it took so long for the FDA to look into the Abbott plant after a whistleblower came forward way back in October. Richard, do you think we're going to get answers and accountability on this?
Listen, I hope we do. I'm the biggest proponent of government accountability and transparency so the American people know exactly where their money is going. With that being said, to look at this problem and to sort of lap it at the foot of the president and say this is all Joe Biden's fault and it's all Joe Biden's incompetence is a very simple way to look at a more complicated problem that was caused because of major problems at the Abbott factory, number one. And number two, it's also caused because we live in a world in which we have, instead of we're looking out for mothers, we've created a system which is only 1 or 2 corporations in America and only in America that produce baby formula for our infants and for America's future. So maybe the conversation that should be being had in Washington, D.C. is how do we create more suppliers of baby formula, and how do we ensure that women and families of all races, of all genders, of all zip codes can afford that baby formula. I mean, Shannon, before this shortage, I remember going into grocery stores and literally seeing people figuring out looking at the formula outfit and how they were going to pay for $13 to $14 per bottle of formula. There's got to be a conversation about the cost that is coming at the hands of these parents.
Well,
So if any of that were true, Shannon, if any of that were
Okay.
true,
But it's
why
all-
couldn't they have started that in the summer
Well,
of last summer?
yeah, we have to ask a question too. If
You
this
didn't know
happened,
there was a problem last
if this, well, they did. There were people that were warning, but it obviously headed to a crisis point at the beginning of this year. And we can only wish the best to this administration, the FDA, and anyone else that is going to try to solve this problem for the babies out there of America. I know we agree on that, so we can end there. Richard and Horace, thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you. Have a great Wednesday.
You too.